Hey everyone, thank you for joining. It's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Rich Stromberg. And just to give you a little bit of background, Mr. Stromberg is one of the co-founder of Equitable Solar Solutions. So it's a nonprofit organization that helps community with renewable energy. And Mr. Stromberg is also a PhD student. So he's studying right now to become a doctor at the University of Alaska. And just to give you a little bit of background, Mr. Stromberg has 20 years of experience in semiconductor manufacturing. He has 15 years of experience working on energy systems and energy efficiency. He's currently leading research on the reuse of photovoltaic, aka solar equipment, for the social and ecological benefit. His focus on the reuse of photovoltaic equipment basically began when he was mentoring 5 undergraduate students on the capstone project. And this project later on evolved into the nonprofit organization today that helps a lot of households and communities that are in need, and it really helps them to cover basically the cost of energy. In the talk today, although new equipment is great, right, when we have the funding for it, Mr. Stromberg is going to highlight how important it is not to overlook the benefits of used or donated equipment. And we can use that equipment to support research, support educational goal, like at the university. And we don't have to wait necessarily to have a grant, right? Or we don't have to wait for another grant opportunity to come out. And that just delays things, right? So Mr. Stromberg is going to explain today how reuse or donated equipment, when we carefully design this, how we're going to get that equipment, it can really provide a lot of benefits, not only to the university, but even inside the communities. So Reach is a man of action. He's always on the move. He's helping a lot of communities, and we really appreciate what he's been doing. And Mr. Stromberg, we look forward to your talk. The title is How Reuse Equipment Can Support Your Research and Create Value for Your Community. So we look forward to your talk. You have our undivided attention.
And thanks everyone for showing up. I really appreciate it. Wish I could be there in person. Maybe someday I can. I'm going to turn off my camera while I present, just to save a little bandwidth here. And I'm actually talking to you. I had to make a run into town to get the 4-wheel drive fixed on my ranch truck, so that I don't get stuck in the snow on the next storm. We had 2 feet on the ground a week ago. So anyway, I'm going to turn off my camera, and I'll go ahead and share here. And if there are any particular questions, it's okay to interrupt me during my presentation. And let me know if you can see my PowerPoint.
We can see it.
Okay, great. So this is actually the founders of the student founders of Equitable Solar Solutions, and I'll talk more about that program later. Here, I'm going to start off. You see in the box in the upper left, it says used solar panels would have been thrown in landfills. We help those in need. Now, who can tell me? We can't move on from this slide until you tell me anything you notice about those words, what's important, anything that stands out, anything that's unique about those 3 lines.
You guys can all see?
So I'll give you a hint. Count the syllables. Haiku, exactly, yes. And so what's interesting about haiku is that this is a great way to, it challenges you with the constraints of sticking to 5 syllables, 7 syllables, and 5 syllables. But even though that's constraining in some ways, it forces you to think differently. And it actually stimulates alternative thinking and creativity, even though it's a constraint. The photo here, I'll talk a little bit more about this, but these are some school kids in Ukraine with a used solar panel that we've converted into a solar charger. So when the grid goes down from attacks by Russia, they and their teacher can still power some equipment. They can keep their phones charged to stay in communication with others, those kind of things. So haiku, like I said, it's a constraint. But I've just added a little clip from Harvard Business Review, and they think that constraints are good for innovation, and I tend to agree. It says here that managers tend to consider compliance restrictions and a lack of resources as the main obstacles. The common wisdom suggests eradicating all constraints by getting rid of rules and boundaries, creativity, and innovative thinking will thrive. But the Harvard research challenges this wisdom and suggests that managers can innovate better by embracing their constraints. And so you can read a little bit more. There's up here, this quote is, it's a form of Japanese poetry, known for its constraints and its impact. It's a revered historic art form. And you'd be surprised at how much meaning you can pack into just 17 syllables. And then I'll show you this other fellow up here, the photograph. This is from the 1930s, 1940s. In France. His name is Django Reinhardt, and he actually is missing several fingers, and his fourth and fifth fingers on his right hand were badly damaged in a fire when he was younger. But so he just developed different ways to play the guitar, and you should listen to his stuff. Django Reinhardt, he's incredible. So yes, he had these constraints, but it just caused him to develop a whole new way of playing the guitar. So constraints aren't necessarily a bad thing. A common constraint that we see, though, is lack of funding in so many ways. Funding is really critical, and without it, it does limit us, but I think we also overestimate how it limits us, and I'll talk to that. So over the past 3+ years in the current administration, there's been a lot of funding available. Even so, though, there's been fierce competition, and that's for a couple of reasons. One is that in the prior administration, there was a greatly reduced amount of funding. So then when you open up new opportunities, there's going to be a lot of people, but there's always great teams and new ideas coming forward, and so you still have to compete for those. There's research funding for, what you should do is you should research the federal, state, and private sources that are available. But when you do that, look at individual funds and try to find out who has been awarded funding, what was their scope of work, what funding amounts they had, and that will help you to figure out, instead of trying to blast out and apply to everybody, find out which ones are best suited for the kind of work you're trying to do. And then you target those fewer funding sources with the ones you think are the best fit. Otherwise, you can just spend so many hours applying for funding, and you get feeling disappointed because you're putting all this time and you're getting rejected. So if you more narrowly do your research and taper your applications to particular funding groups that like the kind of work, they're interested in the kind of work you're doing, that will help you as well. We may be entering a new era with your available funds. We'll have to see what happens with this new administration. But you should keep applying because this kind of funding is how you get brand new equipment and pay everybody's salaries and cover tuition, all that great stuff. But so keep doing that. But in the meantime, don't just sit around waiting. Consider, here's one thing, is older equipment models. I've got some examples. I don't know the background of all the different majors that people are working on in this group, but so I picked some analytical equipment. But you can see that there's places where you can go online and find older laboratory and other types of equipment for use. It still costs money, but it's not nearly as much. And depending on what you're doing, you might be able to scrape together enough to get an older piece of equipment that might still work for your needs or get you partway through the work you're trying to do, the research. And keep in mind, let's say the 10, 15-year-old equipment, it doesn't nearly have the resolution of brand new equipment, but you can still learn the techniques and methods around those particular analytical techniques, those research methods, and come up that learning curve, because there's always going to be a learning curve. And you might as well do it while you're waiting for that grant funding and you have this older equipment, and maybe this equipment gives you 10% plus or minus 10% accuracy, and you really need 0.5%. But still, you might find some signals, even with this older equipment, that might be helpful for your research, and you can include that data in further grant proposals to show, hey, we are doing something, we're learning, we're not starting just green, fresh out of the chute, not really knowing too much. You're coming up that experience and that learning curve. But these can still be out of your budget. So consider, I've used cheap equipment from overseas. Now, I haven't bought anything from Temu or Temu, I'm not sure how they pronounce it. I have had good luck, though, with this company, TomTop. They're in China as well, tomtop.com. I've never had an order not get filled or have them ship the wrong equipment. I bought a little bit from AliExpress, but you can see here's some spectrum analyzers, quite affordable. In fact, I'm going to be buying one of these to do a small research study on trying to detect arc faults in a large field of solar panels. And if there's any arcing, I know that electricity arcing can emit in the radio frequency. So I'm going to get one of these things and see if I can't detect some arcing, and it's a low cost. And then here's I have one of these handheld thermal imagers. This one's about $200. The equivalent resolution, this is 256 by 192. FLIR, which is the top brand company for thermal imaging cameras, I would pay $2,500 for this same resolution. And I can tell you that I was on a school roof looking at inspecting their solar array, and I happened to leave this camera behind. And while I was gone, I drove 3 hours home, then realized, oh no, that's on the roof. In the meantime, it had rained 2.5 inches at that site. And so the camera was basically destroyed, but I only lost a $200 camera and not a $2,500 camera. So I still figured that I came out ahead. So keep in mind that the quality on these, they may not last 20 years, but even a name brand high-end equipment that you buy with your grant funding, that will probably be obsolete in about 3 years anyway, and you may only need the tool for a year or two to get you through graduation. So there's still a lot of value and I can certainly recommend TomTop and AliExpress. Some other things to consider is used equipment, whether it's purchased or donated. So there's still lots of stuff on eBay. eBay can be, depending on what you're buying, more competition, and it might not be as cheap as you want, but look at what's out there, learn what the market rate is for some of those, and that will help you to find out, well, what's this actually selling for versus the initial asking price. But I found that sometimes different brands for the same type of equipment, a name brand can fetch a premium price, but another piece of equipment that people don't know about, that can be a lot cheaper. So here's an example of a thermal imaging drone for $3,250. And DJI is the top brand, but I was also looking on there, and for only $1,800, there was an equivalent configured drone from a company called Parrot Anafi out of France. That's where it's made. This was made in China, and for basically half the price. So it takes a little while on eBay to kind of learn what's the going market and are there any alternatives, but that's another one to consider. And then I highly recommend this next one too, is write to companies that are already use the same type of equipment. Find out if they're considering an upgrade to a newer model. That's when you want to hit them. In fact, or even before, start building that relationship. And they might be willing to donate their old equipment to your university. Or let's say your university can't provide the same kind of a tax incentive. Talk to a local nonprofit. Maybe it's your church or a food bank or anything like that that's a local nonprofit. Explain your situation, and maybe the company can donate to that nonprofit, get their tax donation letter, and then they just transfer the equipment over to you to use. So I urge you to channel your inner MacGyver on trying to figure out how to make something work when you have little or no resources. Now, as far as MacGyver goes, it's up to you if you want to have a mullet or not. I don't advise it, but hey, to each their own, right? Okay, so next thing you want to do is you can also network to find people who might be able to train you. So you can attend conferences in your field and build your network with those folks. And that can help for future employment as well. There's quite a few conferences that will comp students the registration fee if you help them to facilitate that conference. And so then you can go and you can meet people and find out, hey, who's operating this kind of equipment? Start to make an introduction and see if you can volunteer to come in, help them out in their lab or whatever, or out in the field work, that kind of stuff, and learn how to use the equipment that way. But build relationships, show them that you have initiative, and just ask them to train you. And these are the kind of things that can help even 5 years down the road if you've made connections in your preferred career field that you want to work on. And then another thing, this is something I did, build it yourself. Just kind of get started. While you're waiting around for grant funding, your labor is free to you. You should be charging other people your labor, but to you, your labor costs you nothing. And if you've got time available, just start building it. So what I did for part of my PhD research is I got a used shipping container that was 20 feet long, and then I set it on my land here at the ranch. And then I had used solar panels I had that were donated. I got used mounts and rails and that kind of equipment that's donated. I bought some low-cost Chinese equipment. Here's a colorimeter. It's a type of spectrometer. I got a used camera to do electroluminescence imaging. I have a repurposed tripod I put the camera on. A lot of work myself, but I built this laboratory to do research on different failure modes for older solar panels. And because of this, I did have to spend some money, and I dipped into my retirement to kind of come up with a little cash when I needed it. But by doing this, it's actually attracted attention from national laboratories who are bringing me on to work and partner on some of their grants. So they've already got the funding, and I'm like a sub-awardee is what they call it. So I was able to continue my research and kind of make more of a name for myself with National Renewable Energy Labs, Sandia, national laboratories, places like that. So again, see what you can do, build it yourself. In fact, I'll tell you, there's a young woman that I met when she was still a senior in high school. She lives in Baltimore, and she's now a student at University of Maryland. But she had, what impressed me is she didn't really have any resources, and she was actually able to make a solar cell using graphite from pencil lead and some other materials to make a crude solar cell. And that so impressed me. Here she is with basically nothing, and she's still learning things. And she's not letting anything stop her. So her name's Emma. She's great. But again, build it yourself if you can. Okay, shifting a little bit. When I was finished with my master's degree, I had an opportunity to go down to Puebla, Mexico, and spend 2 weeks at Tec de Monterrey Puebla campus, working with some of their students and one of their professors. And instead of staying at the fancy high-end hotel near the university, we got an Airbnb in a working class neighborhood. And that was really eye opening to me because we grab an Uber, stay there, and we just walk to restaurants and just like little restaurants with plastic chairs out on the street, people selling pastries out of the back of a Volkswagen van, and shopping at the local grocery store where all the other locals shopped. And you got to see how kind of they run things in their community. And there are so many small appliance repair and auto repair shops. And we just walked down the block. If you needed a spare part for something, there'd be just a small storefront with a roll-up door, and they'd have all these little parts and stuff. And what surprised me is how much more Mexico has a culture of repair, whereas here in the U.S. we tend to just dispose of things. And partly is because there's so many equipment manufacturers that don't allow people to repair. But in Mexico, it's a culture. Why would you throw that away when you can repair it? And so that was really informative to me. I'll also add, if you ever go to Puebla, we stayed in this community on the west side of town called Reforma. And there's this little place called Tacos El Puente. They're literally located under a freeway bridge. It's a wood and tin shack. And they got 3 guys working in there. It is absolutely the best food, not just Mexican food, but the best food I've ever had. And they're 10 pesos or 50 cents per taco. And it was just absolutely amazing. So highly recommend Puebla. And but I'm sure it's similar in other parts of Mexico too, as far as they have a culture of repair. And to me, that's really important. It keeps a lot of this equipment out of the landfill. And we get the most use out of it for the time and the materials that we put in to build these things. So then I went from Mexico for 2 weeks to being a researcher in Sweden. And I got to tell you, Puebla, Mexico is a cultural site, a UN cultural site for food. And then I go to Sweden, and their idea of cuisine is putting mayonnaise on things. So it's like, food-wise, it wasn't very good. But what I was studying there, I got to be a guest researcher to learn about how they turn their waste streams into energy. And they do it 2 ways. One is they take the type of household and business waste that can be burned, combusted, and they turn that into both electricity, and they run district heating loops through town, so that they take the excess energy that's not being used to create electricity. They still harness that, and they provide heat for houses, businesses, and it's all done through heat exchangers. And so, as such, their power plants are 80% efficient. Whereas here in the U.S., if you have a single cycle coal or natural gas plant, it's about 35% efficient, and a combined cycle plant is 60%. Whereas in Sweden, 80% efficiency on that, and they've done something with their waste stream. They also take food waste from households, and then it's separated out at the main sorting facility. They have a black plastic bag for food waste, a white bag for burnable waste. So they have an optical sorter, and then they take all their food waste, and then that is they put it into these big containers that create methane biogas. It's like at the right temperature, and they eliminate any oxygen in there, and they have the right kind of bacteria, and then they use that biogas to run their city buses. So here's what they look like. They have a lot of city vehicles, and so they take all their food waste plus their wastewater treatment facility. Also, they take all the human waste, the sewage, and they convert that into biogas. So instead of having to dump it someplace, all this waste gets turned either into energy for transportation or electricity and district heating for their communities. As such, in Sweden, about 2% of their total waste stream actually ends up in the landfill. Everything else is either recycled or it's turned into electricity and district heat, or it's turned into a transportation fuel. So, and how they do that also is that it's the same company that manages the whole stream, whereas here in the US, we have one company that manages the landfill, and they only get paid if people are dumping trash. So they don't have any incentive to reduce the amount of trash people are dumping in their landfill. Separately, we have a different company that does recycling, and we'll have a different company that sells heat, and a different company that sells electricity, and a different company that sells transportation fuel. So by combining it all within one organization, they can optimize for the best financial and societal benefit by doing this. But I'll just summarize it. The U.S., we see these things as waste, whereas Sweden looks at them as raw materials. And after coming away from that 2 months in Sweden, I came back to the U.S. and I started working with some students here in Colorado. And these 5 students were in their capstone class to come up with a senior project in the School of Environment and Sustainability. And so I had found a dozen used solar panels, and I brought them to the class and said, hey, look here, these things operated for 18 years on a house. They've been removed, the homeowner upgraded to newer equipment, but I measured them and they still produce about 83% of the original power on the data sheet. So why they're going to get thrown away, but why would we throw them away if they still make so much energy? So I challenged them. I said, hey, let's figure out a way that we can use these assets to create the greatest value for those with the greatest need in our community. And so this is just going to be a semester-long capstone project. And over the course of the semester, we tried many different things, and they finally came up with this model of a nonprofit where people can donate to us their old equipment and then and get a tax benefit for that. But that doesn't cost us anything if we're a nonprofit to issue them a tax deduction. And then we can take that equipment and work with solar installers to reinstall it. So that's what we did. And actually, at the end of the semester, Maria here and CJ decided they still wanted to keep it going. And so we actually started the nonprofit Equitable Solar Solutions. Now, our constraints are we're always equipment rich and cash poor. We didn't have at the time prior knowledge to work from. How do you even go about reusing this kind of stuff? Nobody was doing that. And then we also found that sometimes we were pitching to people who just don't understand the possibilities. And then further, we weren't NABCEP certified as solar installers to reinstall this. What this did, though, is it forced us to develop partnerships. And really, we've learned that we'd rather develop partnerships than competitors. And so we partner with solar installers and actually bring them more business for people who would never otherwise be able to afford a solar array. And cash poor, we partner with social service agencies that provide energy assistance or food assistance or healthcare assistance to these same underserved populations. And they typically have money that they can provide to help pay for some of these solar arrays. So if you want, you can go to equitableSolarSolutions.org, and here's kind of our landing page. And I'll just add that our main focus is to create the greatest value for those with the greatest need with this reuse equipment. Here's kind of a flow of how it works. People will donate inverters, modules, rails, mounts, all those kind of things to us. And then we'll issue back a tax receipt so they can deduct the current value of this equipment off of their income and get a tax benefit. Sometimes people will donate cash, but mostly we get equipment. And then we work, here's some students that are working to test different modules. Some of it fails and it gets sent to recycling. If it's not top tier, it still works, but we see issues that would make us question whether or not it would last another 20 years on a low-income rooftop. We don't want these families who have been in the past exploited with environmental and social injustice, of dumping hazardous materials into their community. We never want them to feel like we gave them anything other than the top quality. Otherwise, they're going to look at this and say, hey, you're just dumping your electronic waste in our neighborhood. We don't like that. So, but this lower tier equipment we can still use for agricultural purposes where cattle can rub up against it and damage it. And if you lose a module, oh well, it was used, and we got a couple more years out of it. Any kind of ground mount systems we can go up and inspect and monitor. If it should fail, we can just replace it there. But we don't want to be on your grandmother or grandfather's rooftop lifting up panels trying to figure out which is the bad one that failed. We only give them the best equipment, so that's our tier 1 equipment. And we work with Habitat for Humanity or other low, medium income homeowners. We've done programs where we built arrays and then the energy savings actually goes to add funds towards energy efficiency programs for low and medium income households, giving more budget for that. The payback is actually really good on this. We can also do with the solar power generation, just offset their monthly energy bill. And then things like this will work with, say, the food bank or a woman's shelter or a health clinic. And through those agencies, if we put a solar array on their roof, more of their program dollars can go towards serving their needs-based clients and not have to go towards paying utility bills. So that's how we work. That's how kind of the whole program works. And here's Habitat for Humanity. This woman here is Rosalba. This is her first house, she and her husband, and we're giving her 5 kilowatts of solar panels up on the roof, and she's really happy about that. And then nice thing about Habitat is any additional cost besides the equipment we provide and the volunteer labor that we help with the solar installer, Habitat just rolls those incremental costs into their monthly house payment. So yeah, it goes up a little bit, but their house payment might go up $25, but we're saving them $60 a month on their electricity, so they still come out ahead. And then down here, here's some more solar for Ukraine, where we take used panels and we attach USB converters like you buy at an auto parts store, just wire them in directly. And so when the grid gets attacked, these go to defense units, health clinics, schools, displaced person camps. And they can keep devices charged even when the grid's down. And that's really important to stay in communication when attacks are underway. So we've sent more than 250 modules now over to Ukraine. And it's just heartbreaking when you get on a Zoom meeting with these school kids and they tell you what it's like to hear the sirens and have to go down into the bomb shelter and continue classes and studying in a bomb shelter. So we're doing what we can to help them. And at the same time, we're keeping this stuff out of the landfill. Since it's used, we figure, hey, it's going to a war zone. If it lasts 2 years, great. It's better than not helping anybody at all. And in fact, we've had soldiers from forward-based units show us the modules that have been cracked from getting hit by shrapnel, and they still are producing power for them. So again, it's benefit as long as we can get benefit. Here's our most recent project. We put a 30 kilowatt DC array on the Gunnison Food Pantry, and they have so many refrigerators and freezers, so their electricity bill is quite high. And through this system, we're offsetting a little more than half of their annual electricity bills just by putting on reused solar equipment. This one we built for 90 cents a watt, or I think it's like 95 cents a watt. That's before the IRA direct pay tax or refund that they get that they can apply for with the IRS. And so it'll actually, I think, come down closer to 70 cents a watt when they're done. Now, a brand new system, if you were to buy, is going to cost you $3.50 to $4 a watt. So we're building these way cheaper. And so the food pantry was able to come up with some donations and get this built, and now they're saving a lot on their energy bills. Something to keep in mind is that not all PV equipment is suitable for reuse. We can't save it all. We should not save it all. If we tried to, we'd probably have poor performing equipment out there failing, and then people get the impression that reuse equipment is poor quality, and we never want that to happen. So I've already mentioned our tier 1, it meets the data sheet, and there's no defects or issues that we think will prevent them from 20 years of future performance, and we don't restrict those. We can use those on any applications. This is the only thing we would put on a low-income rooftop. And then tier 2, there's some restrictions, but we can still find places to use that. But we need to accept that we can't save all the modules and all the inverters, but we save those that we can and help those that we can. So some of the key takeaways I want you to have here are you should identify what your constraints are and then embrace them and say, okay, now that we have this, it may be a limitation, but if we kind of turn it around, we might find ways that it can actually help us, like how we do. It forced us to build partnerships more instead of being a competitor in an already crowded field. So let these constraints force you to think of alternative pathways, alternative solutions. Find value in our waste streams, which, remember, here in the U.S., there's a lot of stuff we see as waste that other people don't. So, and there is a lot of inherent embedded value in what presently we're throwing away. So challenge those assumptions. Come up on the learning curve on old and borrowed equipment. You can still learn. You can still get data. You can still even publish some stuff based on what you're finding. Just acknowledge, hey, this is the accuracy of our equipment, and we will come back and do more work in this on this study when we get the newer equipment, or if you can loan us that newer equipment, those kind of things. You want to create value for people and communities with the greatest need. There's so many people who are energy burdened in this country, and so we really try to focus on helping them first. And then learn by doing. Even if your initial methods are crude, like Emma, the student that was making a very crude solar cell, she was still learning, and you can too. I've learned a lot on using cheap equipment, loaned equipment. I've learned a lot building the laboratory myself. And then next is be persistent, and I would advise you to be a little naive. Summing it up is, if you don't know you're supposed to fail, sometimes you won't. I'm going to say that again. Be a little naive. If you don't know you're supposed to fail, sometimes you won't. And then closing it out here, you'll kind of see, here's a reuse. This is a field charger for a wheelchair. This is a power chair here. This is my neighbor Trey. And he was having to plug in his wheelchair to the little cigarette lighter port on his van and run the van engine to charge up his battery, using a lot of gas, fumes, noise. So when they go on vacations or even day trips, they'd have to do that. And instead, we made 2 modules. They're on a hinge here. There's a latch. There's a charge controller hidden inside and 20 feet of cable. So he can put this out in the sun. He can sit in the shade and still be charging up when they're out doing things. Here's one of the many events we've done of taking solar panels and converting them over to send to Ukraine. Besides just the electrical adding a USB converter, we put artwork and messages of support, and there's almost an equal social value of the artwork and the messages of support, so they know that the U.S. has not forgotten them, we support them, and they get the power. So it's a technical benefit, but also a social aspect too. Here's a Habitat for Humanity couple, a different one from Israel and Rosalba. In fact, we've helped 5 different homes now. We've got 2 more on schedule for this spring. But they said that it's been really great to do so in a cost-effective way with Habitat for Humanity. Obviously, we don't have a lot of excess funds. To have something like this be approachable within our reach is a dream come true. They had always it was like, hey, it'd be nice if we had clean energy, but they were excluded, and now they're not. And to me, that is so strong. I think that's all we have. There's my contact information. Anyone wants to reach out to us, and I will stop sharing now, and we can open up for questions.
Oh, thank you very much for the great talk.